I woke up at 6 a.m. to the sound of Derek's coffee machine gurgling in the kitchen. I'd been up half the night helping Grace manage her nausea. Her cancer treatment was brutal, and she hated the anti-nausea medication. By the time I dragged myself to the kitchen, Derek was scrolling through his phone, the same bored expression I'd seen 100 times before. "Are you taking the car to work today?" I asked, trying to sound neutral. "I'll walk. I can't breathe in this house," he muttered, barely looking up. I sighed. I had spent the last 2 weeks cleaning up after him, making sure Grace had fresh water, organizing her medications, prepping her meals, and somehow keeping the laundry from piling up into a mountain. Derek's passive-aggressive comments were a constant soundtrack. At 7:30 a.m., Grace coughed violently. I ran to her side, grabbing her water and pressing a cool cloth to her forehead. Derek wandered over, still in his slippers, shaking his head. "She needs a nurse, not this," he said, gesturing vaguely at me. I wanted to snap, but I held it in. Instead, I guided Grace to the bathroom, holding her arm while she leaned on me. Derek watched, silent. The day unfolded like this. I drove Grace to her oncology appointment, maneuvering through Philadelphia traffic with her frail body in the passenger seat. Derek stayed home, claiming he had a ton of work, but spent an hour playing video games before calling it quits. When we returned, I found him sitting at the kitchen table scrolling through emails. "Dinner's late," he complained. I had spent the last 2 hours making soup and scrambled eggs for Grace because she couldn't stomach heavy food. "Dinner will be ready soon," I said. He rolled his eyes. By evening, the tension boiled over. Derek dropped his phone on the couch and said, "You're never home for me. You're always with her. I feel like a roommate." I froze. "I'm caring for your mother. You know what she's going through." "I know, and I hate it. You think you're a hero, but you're just making my life miserable," he shouted. Before I could respond, Grace called weakly from her bedroom. "Don't fight, please," she whispered. I ran to her side, heart hammering, while Derek stormed out. I stayed with Grace that night, tucking her in, giving her water, and watching her sleep. Meanwhile, Derek didn't return until midnight, stumbling in with takeout boxes. That night, lying awake on the sofa beside Grace, I realized that Derek's resentment wasn't just about the situation. It was about me, my choices, my devotion. And somehow, I had to survive the storm that was about to hit our marriage, while still being everything Grace needed me to be. The following week felt like a war zone. Grace's condition worsened, and I spent hours juggling appointments, medication schedules, and her dietary restrictions. One morning, I woke up to find Derek in the living room, empty pizza boxes and soda cans scattered around him. "Why didn't you clean this up?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. He shrugged. I wasn't planning to stay here forever. I wanted to throw the boxes at him, but instead, I grabbed a broom and started sweeping. As I worked, he stood behind me, arms crossed, making snide remarks about how I always had to do everything myself, and how he didn't sign up to live in a hospital. By mid-morning, Grace needed me at the hospital for a blood test. I packed her wheelchair into the car, securing her with trembling hands. Derek said he'd drive us, but when we got to the car, he was nowhere to be found. I ended up pushing Grace in the rain, dripping wet and exhausted, while he texted, "I have too much work. Figure it out." Back home, I spent hours cleaning up after him, cooking meals for Grace, and doing laundry that had piled up for 2 days. When I called Derek for help, he muttered, "Why can't you just hire someone?" That evening, a minor argument turned into a shouting match in the kitchen. Derek criticized how I arranged her medications, accused me of playing martyr, and suggested I was controlling everything. I reminded him that I had been managing her care for weeks with no complaint. He threw his hands in the air. "You're impossible. I can't live like this." At that moment, my phone rang. Our neighbor, Mrs. Nigen, calling to say Grace had collapsed while trying to get out of bed. I dropped everything and rushed over, finding Grace pale and sweating, barely conscious. I called 911, stayed on the line until the paramedics arrived, and followed them to the ER. Derek never came. Sitting in the hospital waiting room for hours, I realized that this wasn't just about stress or exhaustion. This was Derek refusing responsibility for even the smallest part of our shared life. He had withdrawn completely, leaving me alone to handle crises, decisions, and emergencies. That night, when Grace returned home and I helped her into bed, Derek appeared briefly to check on her, muttering something about overreacting. I watched him leave for the night, realizing that his presence in my life had become more of a liability than a support. By the end of the week, I was running on fumes. Bills, appointments, and domestic tasks all fell on me, while Derek seemed determined to pick fights over trivialities, like what kind of cereal to buy or whether the thermostat was too high. I realized that unless something changed, this marriage, this household, and my own sanity would collapse. It was a Wednesday morning, and I had been awake since 5 a.m., preparing Grace's breakfast, organizing her medications, and making sure the house was presentable before Derek left for work. I was exhausted, my muscles aching, but Grace needed me, and I couldn't let her down. By 8 a.m., Derek stomped into the kitchen, holding a stack of unopened bills. "I can't believe you didn't pay these," he said, slamming them on the counter. "This is ridiculous. We're drowning in debt because of this house and your caregiving." I blanked, stunned. I had been paying the bills on time, sometimes dipping into my savings to cover Grace's extra treatments. Derek, I've been covering these all week. You know that," I said, my voice tight. "Well, it doesn't feel like it," he shouted, throwing his hands in the air. "I can't live like this, with you mothering everyone but me." Before I could respond, Grace called from the bedroom, coughing violently. I ran to her side, lifting her gently into a chair. Derek sighed dramatically and muttered, "You're impossible. You're turning this house into a hospital, and I'm done." At that moment, everything clicked. This wasn't about stress. It was about his refusal to acknowledge anyone else's needs, his selfishness, and his unwillingness to participate in the life we had built. I spent the next hour with Grace, making her tea, adjusting her pillows, and noting down her symptoms. Derek packed a bag, muttering that he needed space and time to think, and left the house without a word. His car hadn't even cooled down before I called my sister, Claire, to vent. She drove over immediately, bringing sandwiches, extra blankets, and a sense of calm I hadn't felt in weeks. That evening, Derek returned with a new ultimatum. He demanded that I either hire a full-time nurse for Grace or accept that he would be moving out. "I can't live in this constant chaos," he said, voice rigid. I stared at him, anger and exhaustion mixing in a storm of emotions. "No, you abandoned your responsibilities weeks ago. I've been managing everything alone. If you can't handle it, maybe you should leave." He glared, then stormed out again. This time, I realized he wasn't coming back, at least not in the way I had hoped. Over the next few days, Derek's absence became permanent. I took over cleaning, cooking, hospital visits, and medication schedules entirely on my own. But something shifted. Without Derek's constant complaints, I could focus fully on Grace. I organized her prescriptions efficiently, researched new therapies, and even set up a small home health station so she could do light exercises safely. I found myself empowered, even in the chaos, because I realized I was capable of more than I had given myself credit for. By the end of the week, a neighbor called with news that Derek had been seen moving boxes into another woman's apartment. The shock hit hard, but beneath it was a strange sense of relief. I no longer had to contend with his bitterness and selfishness. My life, and my ability to care for Grace, was finally mine to control. By now, the house had become a rhythm I could manage. I had learned to navigate Grace's moods, medications, and daily needs like a well-oiled machine. But life had a way of testing me even further. It started with small gestures. Mrs. Nguyen, my elderly neighbor, began stopping by with fresh bread and vegetables from her garden. She'd sit for a while, chatting with Grace, then help me fold laundry or sweep the floors. Claire, my sister, visited almost daily, taking Grace out for short walks or just giving me a chance to shower and rest. I began to notice that I wasn't as alone as I had felt in the first weeks after Derek left. One afternoon, I received an unexpected call from Derek's brother, Mark. His voice was cautious, almost embarrassed. "Hey, I don't know if you know, but Derek's been staying with someone else. He's been hiding it." I felt the familiar burn of betrayal. I had suspected he was avoiding responsibility, but hearing it confirmed by someone outside the chaos was different. I hung up, taking a deep breath to steady myself. I refused to let anger dominate me, not now. I had bigger things to focus on: Grace, her comfort, and my own future. That week, I was also contacted by a small publishing company I had freelanced for years ago. They wanted me to edit a series of memoirs. The pay was substantial and the schedule flexible. For the first time in months, I felt a spark of excitement, not just surviving, but building something of my own. Meanwhile, Derek sent occasional texts trying to justify himself. I needed a life that wasn't about someone else's illness. I'm sorry, but you don't understand. I didn't reply. I had no patience for his excuses. One day, Grace looked at me with her frail, knowing eyes. "You're a good person. You've done so much for me. Don't let anyone make you feel small." I held her hand tightly, tears threatening. In that moment, I realized that validation doesn't always come from the people who leave you. It comes from the lives you touch and the integrity you uphold. The turning point came when I visited Derek's apartment to return a box of his things he had left behind. Through the hallway window, I saw him laughing with a new woman, carefree and unburdened. A pang of anger and sorrow hit me, but it was quickly replaced with clarity. I had been living in chaos, juggling care and survival, and he had chosen convenience over commitment. The contrast couldn't have been clearer: selfishness versus devotion. I left the apartment without knocking, my heart heavy but my resolve intact. I knew that my life wasn't over because someone else had failed me. I had allies, I had work, and most importantly, I had Grace, who, even in her illness, had shown me the true value of loyalty and empathy. A few weeks after Derek's final departure, life settled into a new rhythm. I continued my freelance editing, taking on more projects than I ever had before. Surprisingly, the work began to pay off handsomely. Clients recommended me, deadlines became opportunities rather than stressors, and I finally felt in control of my own life. One rainy afternoon, I received a letter that would change everything. The envelope was thick, official looking. My hands shook as I opened it. It was Grace's will. She had left me her small home, her savings, and a fund she had set aside specifically for my care and future. I sank into the sofa, the weight of gratitude and disbelief pressing on me. Grace had trusted me, seen my sacrifices, and rewarded integrity with generosity I hadn't expected. That evening, as I sorted through Grace's belongings, I found a small journal she had kept. On the last page, she had written, "She never complained, never sought credit, only love and care. I hope she finds happiness and peace in this life. She deserves it." Tears blurred my vision. Her words affirmed every sleepless night, every missed social event, every moment I had devoted to her well-being. Meanwhile, Derek tried one last time to contact me, claiming he wanted to reconcile and that he had learned his lesson. I didn't respond. Instead, I walked through Grace's old garden, letting the rain wash over me, feeling the first sense of liberation in months. The man who had abandoned me could not take away the strength I had discovered within myself. With the inheritance, I renovated Grace's home, creating a comfortable space not only for myself, but for future volunteer work, offering respite to those caring for ill family members. I even started a small book club for hospice volunteers, connecting with people who understood the delicate balance of empathy and self-care. One evening, while organizing some of Grace's papers, a neighbor came by and said, "You've done an amazing job here. She'd be so proud." I smiled, realizing that recognition doesn't always come from the people who leave. It comes from the impact you make on the lives around you. Derek's absence became a strange blessing. I had survived betrayal, exhaustion, and the chaos of responsibility. In its place, I built stability, community, and confidence. My life was no longer dictated by someone else's selfishness, but shaped by the choices I made and the people who truly mattered. And through it all, I had learned the ultimate lesson. Selflessness and integrity are not weaknesses. They are investments in the kind of life you truly want to lead. A year after everything fell apart, I moved into Grace's small house, now renovated and warm, filled with books, sunlight, and memories of her wisdom. My freelance editing had grown into a steady career, and I finally had a sense of control over my life that I never felt with Derek. I volunteered at the local hospice, guiding new caregivers and sharing the small tricks I'd learned while caring for Grace. Watching others find relief and comfort reminded me why I had endured those months of chaos. My sacrifices had meaning beyond the walls of my home. Derek? I heard he had settled with the woman he had left me for. Rumors suggested he had repeated the same patterns, abandoning responsibilities, chasing convenience. I didn't feel anger anymore, only pity. He had lost the one person who had loved selflessly, and there was no turning back. One evening, while walking through my garden, I met someone new, a kind, patient man who admired my resilience and dedication. It was tentative, cautious, but different. No drama, no selfishness, just genuine interest in sharing life together. For the first time in years, I realized love could feel safe and reciprocal. I thought back to all the sleepless nights, the arguments, the sense of isolation, and I understood clearly. Integrity, selflessness, and compassion are never wasted. They may be tested, but ultimately shape a life worth living. Some people abandon you, some betray you, but those who value your heart, the ones who stay, are the ones who matter. I had lost a husband, but I gained independence, purpose, and clarity. And in the end, that was worth far more than anything Derek had ever offered. If you liked the video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel.